We cannot pretend Israel is this perfect country because a perfect country doesn't exist. But we have to focus on the facts, and we have horrendous disinformation machine against us. It's so much easier to play with emotions than to listen to the facts.
Welcome to What Came After. I'm your host, Manya Marcus. On What Came After, we'll take a look at the many ways that people's lives changed on and after the brutal massacre in Israel on October 7th, 2023. We'll be speaking with people in Israel and around the world about how the devastating attack by Hamas has shifted, shaped, and changed them. To learn more about our podcast, please visit us at whatcameafter.com. Okay, I am so honored to be here with Marta Kubica, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. We are at your offices, the ELNET offices in Warsaw. It is beautiful, and this is the hardest kind of interview for me to do when I interview a friend. And I really feel like in the last day or so, we've become friends. We've spent a lot of time together, and so please introduce yourself. Tell me about where we are and what you do here and how you got into this work.
First of all, it's great to host you here. My name is Marta Kubica. I'm the CEO of ELNET, European Leadership Network's office in Warsaw. ELNET is a pro-Israel advocacy network in Europe where we bring Europe and Israel together. We focus mostly on opinion makers, policy makers, journalists, people whose voice is being heard. We want to make sure that when they talk about Israel, they have enough knowledge and understanding of Israel, Israeli people, Israeli politics, that they can actually really be influential in their own countries.
So I want to amplify here that you are not Jewish. And I find it really interesting and frankly moving when non-Jewish people who are not essentially conscripted into this situation decide to sign up and do this anyway. What brought you into the world of Israel advocacy, and what was your first exposure to Israel like?
My first exposure to Israel was when I was a teenager and I heard some songs in Hebrew.
So I've heard this before and I have so many questions. Where was this? What were the songs? What was going on that you were listening to Hebrew music?
So every year, first of all, you have satellite, and that was the moment shortly before Ofra Haza passed away, which was like 1999 or something, or 2000.
Okay, you've already exceeded my knowledge of Israeli music. Who are we talking about?
Well, Ofra Haza was one of the really Israeli divas with an amazing voice and very tragic life history. She passed away around 40 from AIDS, which is very unique for Israel in the year 2000.
Yes.
So I strongly recommend trying to read something about her, and her voice is something else. So for me, this first meeting was hearing a song in a language that feels so foreign to me, but is also extremely poetic. So I started digging. It was long before we all had access to internet, at least here in Poland. So I was trying to read whatever I could, grab any piece of information that was available for me. And in that process, I found out that Hebrew is the language spoken in Israel. Israel is a Jewish state. And then my question is, who are Jews?
You didn't know any.
I didn't know any. And this is when the completely new world opened, and I started learning Hebrew. I went to study Jewish studies at the university. I became a chairwoman of a student association, and we started doing Days of Israel. A couple of days student festival where we tried to bring a few guests from Israel and to showcase Israeli movies, Israeli culture to fellow students. And because we were students, we had zero budgets. I remember reaching out to the Israeli embassy here in Warsaw, asking them for little sponsorship, and inviting someone from the embassy to be a speaker. So we hosted both ambassadors and deputy ambassadors. It was great that, the ambassador of Israel was kind enough to come to a student event.
I want to say that this does not surprise me, knowing you now. This is sort of how you work. You build connections and you leverage them, and you make people who might seem inaccessible accessible for, in my opinion, some really good and powerful reasons. My first reaction when I heard how you fell in love with Hebrew language and got so interested in Israel was, did you ever think about converting to Judaism?
No. However, when I discovered there's such a thing like a law of return, I was really digging deep down in my family roots to see if we might have something or someone that might make me eligible to apply. I was 15 or 16, so that was my teenage rebellion phase. I was extremely pro-Israeli, and if someone said anything bad about the Jews in my surrounding, I was becoming really, really, really upset. And I couldn't justify it. Like, I couldn't understand what might be the reason. I can also say that I couldn't see any flaws in Israel or Israeli politics, and it's not good, right? In order to understand the country, the people, the situation better, and to explain it, you need to have a deeper understanding. So when I was the first year at the university, we met people from Israel who were connected to, back then, College of Judah and Samaria in Ariel, who invited us for a student exchange. My first time in Israel was September 2005, and I spent more than 3 weeks in Israel in a dorm in Ariel. That was right after disengagement from Gaza.
Okay, so let's situate this in history. Israel had just left Gaza.
Yes.
2005, I think the second intifada was winding down. And you were in what part of Israel? At Ariel College is where?
Ariel College is behind the Green Line.
Okay, so it's in the West Bank.
So it's the West Bank. And on top of that, because people of Ariel, which is the largest Jewish city in the West Bank, they were afraid they might be next. Because if Israel left Gaza, it might also want to withdraw from Ariel. So Ariel was extremely supportive to all the people from Gaza. So for example, across the street from our dorm, there was this temporary housing built for people from Gush Katif.
These are Israelis who have been sent out of Gaza.
From Gaza, yes. Yes, exactly.
As part of the disengagement from that whole area.
Yes.
By the Israeli government.
And looking back and looking at Israel today, or let's say Israel before October 7, I think back then and last year was the time when Israeli society was really strongly divided. Because there were people for disengagement, there were people against it. Of course, everyone in Tel Aviv was like, this is a good way. And
to disengage. They were more liberal, yeah.
And their arguments were, let's give the Palestinians a chance to really have their own piece of land without us, with access to the sea, with really beautiful infrastructure that was built by Israelis throughout the years. Sadly, we know what happened. We know what happened the year after Hamas was elected. And since then, Gaza was going deeper and deeper into despair instead of growth.
We had this conversation today where you told me that if there were a Free Palestine from Hamas rally, you would be there with bells on. I think it's really important to share that that's your view.
Yes, I don't think Palestinian people are a problem. I think that Hamas and radicals on both sides are the problem.
So you really shifted from thinking of Israel as this state that can do no wrong to going and seeing it and living it. It's interesting. My podcast idol is a guy named Mishi Harman. He does Israel Story. And he says something like, the Israel that people love and the Israel that people hate are both fake Israels, right? The real Israel is always something in between. And it sounds like you've been able to get there, and you're also really passionate about pro-Israel advocacy. Can you talk about how you synthesize a real awareness of the issues on the ground in Israel and the beauties, the challenges, the drawbacks, everything, with the work that you do now?
So I think if we're going to pretend that Israel is only this amazing place that is holy and we can say anything bad about it, we're playing right into the narrative of anti-Israeli and anti-Zionist movements in Europe. There is no perfect state. There is no state that has perfect politics. There is always division of the society. Sometimes it's deeper, sometimes it's not. But every country has its issues. Not every country, though, is being scrutinized like Israel. We cannot pretend Israel is this perfect country because a perfect country doesn't exist. But we have to focus on the facts, and we have horrendous disinformation machine against us. It's so much easier to play with emotions than to listen to the facts. Israel is not oversharing the difficult images. the famous 46-minute movie that was done by the IDF from the materials from the body cams, dash cams, and the materials that were shot by either Hamas or first responders on October 7. This is not widely available. And there is a reason for that. And the reason is, first of all, the war is not over. The trauma is not over. You cannot start the therapy. You cannot start this process because the trauma is still ongoing, and it can cause so much more pain to the families. I honestly wouldn't like to see my sister being raped on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
There is no world in which this price would be worth anything to me, you know?
You're getting a little emotional.
Yeah.
Another one of the things that we spoke about is that it is possible in this line of work, when you have to be strategic and you have to think at different levels, to lose your feeling, to become a little bit numb to the subjects that we're working through, which are very intense and painful. How do you balance being a person with feelings and being in your role of advocacy and thinking about political structures and strengthening institutional relationships?
I think I try to use the potential of our organization to make good things. When the war in Ukraine started, I reached out to my board and I said, look, we need to do something. I know ELNET is not a charity organization, but there is very big need in Poland for some kind of help, and I want ELNET to be involved. What I loved was their answer. They didn't tell me no. They said, okay, think how can we combine our goals and what we do as ELNET with the impact that you want to achieve.
With the Ukrainian invasion.
Yes. So we came up with a couple of amazing programs that were based on bringing Israeli expertise in war trauma, PTSD prevention and treatment. It was mid-March 2022. Millions of Ukrainians were flowing in.
And just to clarify, into Poland, across the border.
And everyone was thinking about the basic needs like clothing, food, shelters, work, school for children. This was this very early stage. So people were not thinking long term. They were not thinking about potential PTSD that people who came to Poland as refugees might develop, because we know not everyone will develop PTSD if treated well. But also there is secondary traumatization. There are traumatized Ukrainian kids in Polish schools. This might affect them in ways that we have no idea.
You mean the traumatized Ukrainian kids can also affect Polish kids who previously weren't aware of the conflict?
Yes. So it's not only supporting Ukrainian society, it's also helping us here. My husband and I, we hosted a couple of Ukrainian families at our home on their way somewhere else. So they needed a shelter for a week or two. And I noticed how unprepared we are for that. No one told us how to deal with people who just escaped the war.
From a psychological standpoint?
From a psychological, but not only. Like when we were preparing our guest room, we have a lot of different books. And my husband studied Eastern European studies. He's also a translator. So he translated several books about that region. So we wanted to make sure that we don't have any single book about Russia or Putin on our bookshelf.
Right.
Because this might be triggering. But again, there is so many things we might not know about. Also, how to protect ourselves. There's compassion fatigue that, again, no one back then was thinking about. So we brought all this expertise from Israel. We brought Israeli psychiatrists, psychologists, trauma therapists to do Train the Trainer program for Polish and Ukrainian mental health professionals. We had some meetings in the parliament. We had meetings with Ministry of Health. We had meetings and briefings for the volunteers, both Ukrainian and Polish. So this is where we could bring Israel into the picture and still do the job that we do, meaning connecting people on even the highest level of administration. And most of the people that met with our guests from Israel have never met anyone from Israel.
First of all, that's really remarkable. And second of all, I think there's kind of a full circle addendum here. Tell me how the moment of having Israeli experts in trauma, and how does that somehow make its way back to October 7th?
So the Train the Trainer program was designed for 6 months in-person training in Warsaw and then 6 months of supervision. And we plan to have our graduation ceremony for 90 new trainers in November 2023. So, of course, we couldn't do the graduation. The graduation was supposed to be here in Poland, in Polin Museum,
where we were earlier today.
who was so kind to, offer to host us. But our friends from Israel couldn't come. First of all, they were extremely busy. Second of all, they were from Community Stress Prevention Center in Kiryat Shmona.
For those who don't know,
in the north of Israel, Lebanese border, they had to leave their own city.
And there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of rockets since the beginning of the war. And people are coming back to that community now,
Slowly.
but it's been really, really ravaged.
So there is that element. But what was, I think, the most heartwarming is that we got so many messages from the participants of the training asking, do our friends in Israel need anything? Can we help somehow? They were thinking of fundraising campaign. They were also psychologists. So they offered their time and their knowledge to work with people affected by October 7 because they already felt, they were trained in that. But that was really heartwarming. And this showed me that this line of work that we do really works. And then we did graduation in January 2024. It was exactly 100 days of war in Israel. Our friends from Israel came, all our alumni arrived to Warsaw from Ukraine, and it was extremely emotional. We were all wearing yellow pins.
Yellow pins in honor of the hostages.
Exactly. And our friends from Kiryat Shmona said, this is very weird because when we came to help you, you were refugees. Now we're refugees in our own country.
Wow.
It all really is very much intertwined. It was a very moving event.
So I want to talk about another layer that is an interesting intertwining. It's a little more personal for you, though. Your husband grew up in Chicago, and there is this sort of backstory going back to the Holocaust. I'm wondering if you can share that with us.
Absolutely. So this wonderful man I'm married to happens to come from a family in which his grandfather, together with his brother, were righteous among the nations. They saved 5 Jewish people for over a year during the war in what's now Ukraine. All of them survived the war. One left the hiding place when the Soviets came in and was recognized by Ukrainian soldiers and was shot. The 4 others survived. And they somehow made it to Chicago area, to Skokie.
My hometown.
Exactly. And they were in touch. The families kept in touch. So Arthur's family came to the US a few times in the 70s. And then in 1981, a martial law was declared in Poland. So they were allowed to stay as a kind of political refugees.
In the United States.
In the United States. So a year after my husband was born. But when you think of it, his family saved those Jewish people. And then you can kind of say that the Jewish people saved his family from martial law. And his father was involved in solidarity movement. Those people were being imprisoned. So he grew up in Highland Park, Highwood, and then he moved back to Poland. So when I met him, he told me he just came back from Israel. He went to Yad Vashem to see his grandfather's name on the wall. And it was very
just
moving.
To clarify, Arthur is also not Jewish.
Arthur's also not Jewish.
And he was going to see, because Yad Vashem has a list of, what is it?
Around 40, 50,000 people recognized.
So he was looking for
his grandfather's name on the inscription.
Okay, so non-Jewish Polish-American Arthur has now returned to Poland where he meets you.
Yes, which was a nice coincidence. And we started, talking about like his experience, my experience. Like he's been to so many bar mitzvahs as a kid because most of his friends were Jewish or Italian.
Which is an interesting contrast to you, who had never met a Jew by the time you were 15 or 16.
Exactly.
Let me ask you a question. There are a lot of people who say, Jews can't be objective on this issue for XYZ reasons. And then they discount non-Jewish perspectives that are more pro-Israel, because they say that people who are pro-Israel right now are just acting out of a sense of too much guilt about the Holocaust. So here we are, we're in Poland. As I'm thinking about it, Poland, Warsaw, the camps, they're kind of their own characters in this narrative of the Jewish story. I'm wondering what you have to say to people who would tell you, Marta, the reason you care about this is because you feel guilty that the Holocaust happened here, and I don't want to listen to your perspective.
Well, first of all, I cannot feel guilty about something that I had no influence over. I cannot be guilty for other people. I can be ashamed of those who were denouncing Jews to the Nazis. I can be proud of all the, righteous among the nations, and I'm happy to be married to a grandson of one of them. But I don't do it because of guilt. I do it because I fell in love with Israel. Everyone, including myself, thought it's going to be a phase. Teenagers have phases. They like this, they like that, and it changes. And for me, it didn't. And even though it's a very tough line of work, especially here in Poland, especially after October 7, I really feel privileged and lucky that this became my full-time job.
It's amazing.
It really is.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family's story and what was happening with them during the war?
Sure. So my family during the war was in two different places. My paternal family came from Galicia, so southeastern Poland. And my mother's family came from Lublin area, where Majdanek is. Majdanek is one of the death camps. You have Auschwitz, Kulmhof, Sobibor, Treblinka, and Majdanek. Those were the death camps. So there is one standing there on the outskirts of the city. My great-grandfather from my mom's side was part of the partisan movement. My grandma was born in Lublin in September 28, 1939. And her birth certificate has a Nazi swastika because it was General Gouvernement. And because of her father's involvement with the partisans, they decided to leave the city and to move to the village. She's the only child. My grandma, she was raised mostly by her mom because, father was somewhere hiding in the forest. And she was telling me one story that, there were Germans in the village. There was one guy that kind of started to follow her mom when she was taking her out for a walk. And they got scared. And it turned out that my grandma looked very much like the baby that he left back in Germany. So that's the only story I know from her from World War II.
And he was a soldier?
He was a German soldier.
Oh.
He was a German soldier that was patrolling the village. My father's side came from Galicia. My grandma was 10 when the war started. So she remembered more. And honestly, she wasn't very fond of the Jewish people. And when she found out that, I have this passion for Israel, for Jewish culture, she was like, but why? She couldn't understand it. While the other side of my family was and still is very proud of what I do.
Tell me more about how you had this conversation with your grandmother.
So when I told her I'm going to study Jewish studies, she's like, what is there to study? That was her reaction.
And where is she from? Where was she from?
She was from city of Yarosław, which is very close to the Ukrainian border now. And she didn't have any fond memories of Jewish neighbors or, Poland in the 30s. But none of my grandmothers talked about Jews until I started.
Well, you were really lucky, I think, with your husband because it sounds like he completely understood and was equally interested in the kind of work that you're doing. Tell us about some of your professional history. You've also worked in the Israeli embassy in Poland. There was a detail we learned today that I found quite moving, and also tell us about your time in the embassy.
Sure. So there's a lot to be said about Polish-Israeli history. First of all, Poland was one of the first countries that recognized Israeli independence. Poland was also a place where Israel opened its first ever embassy in the world.
There's a photo of the Polish government receiving an Israeli diplomat in 1948.
In September 1948.
It's pretty remarkable.
This is one of the little secrets that people are not aware of. After the war, Poland became part of the Soviet bloc, not the Soviet Union, but it was Polish People's Republic associated and kind of steered from Moscow. After Six-Day War, Polish authorities automatically were forced to side with the Arab side of the conflict.
Because they had to follow the
Russian... They had to follow the Russian bloc because, Israel was always its playground for the bigger powers.
Yes.
Nothing changed in 2025.
Yes.
Israeli ambassador was expelled from Poland, and Israeli embassy was closed between 1967 to 1990, where the diplomatic relations were restored. So I spent 10 years at the Israeli embassy, and I met amazing people and was really exposed to some amazing histories.
So tell us how you got into that kind of work.
So I was ambassador's assistant. I got this job offer after we, as students, were reaching out to the embassy, asking them for money. They were coming over and they saw that First of all, I care for Israel. Second of all, I can arrange things. And they were looking for someone who can support ambassador in his daily work. Israeli ambassadors in Poland travel a lot. They have a lot of meetings. They visit many communities. So they really needed someone who can make the schedule and arrange all the meetings, sometimes help with translations as well, because not every ambassador spoke Polish. So they offered me a job. I studied in Krakow. So I moved to Warsaw and I spent 10 years at the Israeli embassy, which was really incredible time. I worked with 3 different ambassadors. Each of them was completely different. So I felt like I had 3 different jobs. And really, I experienced some of the most incredible situations that you can think of. Some were very important and very moving. Some of them were very funny.
There is a story that you shared with us about President Rivlin visiting in 2014. Could you put that on air for us? Put that on record? Are you willing to?
Sure.
It's funny now. I think at the time it would have been a very stressful situation.
It was very stressful for me, for sure. So every time there is a presidential visit to Poland, Polish president organizes welcoming ceremony in front of the presidential palace. And the ceremony has a couple of elements. There is national anthem. There is like official introduction of the delegation members. There is a military orchestra present. And then there are ambassadors lined up according to their precedents. The visiting president is actually shaking their hands. And then at the very end, he comes and shakes hands with the selected embassy staff. So we're standing there in this beautiful courtyard in front of the presidential palace. It's September 2014. President Rivlin, it's his first foreign trip as a president. He came to Poland for opening of the Polin Museum. And after Hatikva, when the president starts walking, the Polish military orchestra starts playing a tune that is normally associated with the country.
So you asked me what I thought it was, and I said Hava Nagila, and I thought that would have been a little bad.
And I said, I wish.
What was the song that they chose?
It was Fiddlers on the Roofs, If I Were a Rich Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
This would be a really horrible and later amusing song to play at an Israeli event anywhere in the world for obvious reasons of stereotyping and Jews are into money and all this stuff. But I really feel like in Poland in particular, this is not the place to make that mistake. And it just brings me back to Poland. Poland as a figure. Poland as a long shadow in the Jewish story and contemporary Jewish history. Although maybe, do you feel that that's ending? Do you feel that people are losing the focus on Poland now that we're focusing on the world that has so changed post-October 7th? I'll put it to you this way. On October 6th, 2023, if you said, I am going to make an arrangement for you to meet a survivor, I would say, okay, that's an Auschwitz survivor. Now, if you say I'm going to arrange for a Jewish event with survivors, I think you're talking about October 7th survivors. So I'm asking if you feel that there's a shift in the Jewish world away from the trauma of the Holocaust to the trauma of October 7th, and if you feel that in a particularly Polish way or not.
Those 2 events are really brought together in a conversation. I honestly don't think they should. Holocaust was the largest massacre of the Jewish people that was done in a meticulous, planned, and very well executed way in order to get rid of the entire nation. October 7th was horrible, but I don't feel it was that. And I think that comparing October 7th to the Holocaust is diminishing the meaning of the Holocaust. And also, it is somehow giving arguments to the other side of the, pro-Palestinian movements that for Jews, everything is Holocaust. And Holocaust is the holy word that you cannot argue with. So that's my feeling. But I have to tell you, I have been to Auschwitz many times, mostly because of my work. But there was one very particular visit that I remember very well, and it really struck me. And it was last year. We brought one of the Knesset members to Poland. We did an event in the Polish parliament to, first of all, raise awareness about the gender-based violence perpetrated by Hamas, and also talk about, about the hostages. And so it happened that this visit was around January 27th, which is the anniversary of liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. So I brought my guest, who was visiting Poland for the first time, to Auschwitz. It was horrible weather. We arrived early. It wasn't a big anniversary, so there was we basically were alone in the camp. and we had an amazing guide, and it really felt different for me. I was thinking what events actually allowed for Auschwitz to happen.
So the visit you're referring to was the first Auschwitz commemoration anniversary after October 7th.
Yes.
And you were there in a quieter way. There wasn't a crowd.
Yes, there wasn't a crowd, and also the ceremony itself was much smaller. But the fact that me and my guest were there just with a guide and, a security person and Joanna from my office. And it was horrible weather. It was cold. It was raining. It was a lot of mud around. It really felt different. This visit really shifted something for me. It's horrible to say, but because I visited Auschwitz so many times, I was becoming a little bit numb, like you mentioned at the beginning. But this visit really changed this in me. So I'm not that numb. I'm not cynical anymore.
When you started to realize what actually had happened on October 7th, what did it feel like for you to see some of that footage to understand the level of brutality?
It really took me a long time to understand what's really going on. It was Saturday, and I remember my husband woke me up and says, "Look, I don't want to disturb your beauty sleep, but I think there is something really horrible happening in Israel." And then I turn on my phone and I see hundreds of WhatsApp messages. And then I started reading the news, and I was glued to my phone for the next 3 days. You know how trauma works. Each of us have a different picture that's associated. And for me, and it's probably a picture I will never get rid from my brain, is a picture of Naama Levy brought to the car in her sweatpants full of blood. When I saw this picture, this is when I started to realize what is happening there.
And I want to say that right now, Naama Levy has been free for...
You have no idea how much I've been waiting for her return and to see that she's alive. For me, this was one of the most important recent events. And I know there are others. We're really waiting for all the hostages to be back home now. But seeing her back home, seeing her meeting her family, it really gave me hope that this nightmare might be over. And maybe not everyone's dead. I'm still waiting for Shiri and her kids. But this picture really gave me hope.
When October 7th was happening, how quickly did you start realizing that your work was going to change? And how has it changed?
We had our director's call immediately because we had to rethink all our strategy. We knew that we cannot be bringing delegations in the same format as we did, because one of the main activity of ELNET is bringing European policymakers, opinion makers, and journalists to Israel for them to experience Israel on the ground, not through news, not through briefings, but on the ground, meeting people, seeing how the country looks, how the country works, so then they can, make their own educated decisions or opinions. But we knew that this cannot be happening. On the other hand, we got such an amazing wave of support from the alumni of our programs. So many people texted me or called me asking how are our friends in Israel who took care of them when they were visiting, or look, I drafted this support statement, or can you help me draft a statement? The psychiatrists were asking, can we help Rambam Hospital, with which we did a different project? Do they need staff on the ER? This is when I realized why we do what we do. For Israel to have friends on its darkest hour. And what's pretty amazing in a small organization like ELNET, even though we have offices across Europe, we have probably around 50 people, 50 to 60 people working for the organization worldwide. It's small, but we can work very fast. We don't have bureaucratic machine. We can move our funds where it's needed with, of course, our board approval. We decided that since we have all those people who are asking how it is, we should bring them to Israel. We actually should bring them to Israel. Our first delegation, which was a mini delegation, it was a special envoy from President Macron, Bernard-Henri Lévy, was in Israel with us on October 8th.
Tell us who that is. That's a pretty remarkable man.
Yes, Bernard-Henri Lévy is one of those amazing contemporary philosophers. He's been very much involved in working in different war zones. He wrote some amazing books, including a book about Israel post-October 7th. So he came with us to Israel on October 8th. So we were able to act that fast. And since then, between October 8th and end of 2024, we brought over 300 policymakers from all over Europe to Israel on solidarity missions.
You were in Israel on October 8th?
I weren't.
Oh, the delegation was
No,
there.
it was a very small group from France, headed by Bernard-Henri Lévy. I wasn't. I went to Israel only at the end of January. I couldn't go before.
How come?
First of all, I heard a lot of feedback from my colleagues who have been there end of October, beginning of November, when things were really rough, when the kibbutzim were not cleaned yet, when there was still blood, when there still was smell, when there were still bodies arriving at the Shura base for identification. I had this feeling that, Israel is my crazy aunt, the flamboyant, well-traveled, crazy, but good at heart. And that this aunt is right now in hospital, undergoing a horrible chemo, and I'm not ready to see her yet. But then at some point, I felt, okay, this is it. I have to go and see it. I have to go and visit my crazy aunt. And this visit really changed a lot for me. Tel Aviv was always my happy place. It's not anymore. I hope it will be one day again. When I met with, my friends, I stayed a couple of days after the delegation ended to meet with my friends to see how they are. Everyone had this, spark of sadness. And on the other hand, I was so angry. No one's talking about what's going on here. No one is talking about human stories. No one is talking about what Israeli society is going through, because everyone's focusing on the war and on what's going on in Gaza and what IDF is doing and humanitarian aid trucks. No one's talking about the hostages. And the world is turning against Israel in a very dangerous way, in my opinion. Look what happened in Amsterdam and other cities. So when I was very angry, I wanted somehow to turn this anger into action, to channel it, because if you're just angry, it's not benefiting anyone. And a couple of months later, I managed to bring our first ever women's delegation to Israel. 19 remarkable women from 12 countries in Europe, including Iranian dissident and women's rights activists, including Ukrainian participant. And the topic for our delegation was gender-based violence. It's very universal. It's a horrible topic. I wish I didn't have to see, read, or hear those stories. But if I care about Israel and I don't want to hear them, why people who don't care should? So we brought this delegation. It was the most emotional trip to Israel for me. We met so many amazing, amazing women who really became ambassadors of the cause, because gender-based violence is not only Israel-related. It's still happening every day in Ukraine, and we kind of forgot about it.
I think all through the world, actually.
It is crime as old as times because it's so effective.
Yeah.
So I really try to channel my emotions, whatever they are, good, bad, into something that will really make at least a little difference.
It really feels to me, as you talk about everything, that Israel is distinct from Judaism, is distinct from the Holocaust. Like, you're able to, of course, the three pillars intertwine in some ways, but it feels like you see these three things as not completely overlapping with each other.
Not necessarily. I don't think Israel without Judaism would be the country it is, for good or for bad. I wouldn't mind, having a nice bus ride on Shabbat in Tel Aviv, but it's fine. I can manage without it. Because I'm not Jewish, I'm not part of this world. For me, being Jewish is not religion. It's also kind of like a nationality, being a part of a larger group and a larger story. So it's very hard for me to make a separation. And also, I am a Zionist. I do believe that Jews can live whatever you guys want, but you should have your own state in Israel. What do you do on Yom Kippur or Saturday? This is none of my business. I will respect you regardless, And I think this is the beauty of it. We were discussing it before. There's so many beautiful shades of Judaism and being Jewish that it can be very inclusive if you meet the people who are open enough to include you. So I'm not Jewish. I never thought about converting, but I wear it as a badge of honor when my Jewish friends called me an honorary member of the tribe.
Would you say that you feel patriotic as a Polish person?
I do. But I have a feeling that I'm trying to define my patriotism. I disagree with so many things that my governments do. When I go on vacation and I hear Polish, I try to avoid those people.
A lot of Israelis tell me that about other Israelis, so
I
you're
rather
not
hang
alone.
out with Israelis. But when I feel that someone unjustly attacks my country or attacks me because I'm Polish, then I feel like, okay, I'm Polish, but I'm proud of it. I would say this is a way, of my patriotism to shine through in a way. I am really extremely proud of the Polish people, of what we as a society did when the war in Ukraine started. There is a poll that says that around 70% of a 40 million nation was somehow involved in helping Ukrainians. That's a lot. And this wasn't government organized help. It was all grassroots initiatives. So I was very proud back then. I'm not a sports fan, so I don't feel that pride when our football team is winning, whatever. But I am a Polish patriot. And I really think that Poland is a country that, very much like Israel, is not very well understood because there is a lot of stereotypes about Poland, Warsaw, Poles. You being here one day for the first time, I'm sure you came with some vision or some expectations. And I should ask you the question, how do you feel about that? Were your expectations met, or there was something completely different than you expected?
So you might forget, when you were in our shul, you asked if anybody had been to Poland, and a huge number of hands went up. And then you said, has anyone been to Poland on something other than a heritage tour, concentration camp tour? And I was the only one whose hand went up. I spent a weekend when I was in my mid-20s in Krakow. So how do I answer that question with that context? I think that I have been really reminded as a result of spending the day with you and having the tour, talking to your staff, meeting with the rabbi earlier, that it's so important to remember well, not just the tragedies of the past and the Polish Jewish story, which has some seriously unspeakable lows, but also of some of the victories of this union. I went through that museum. I saw some of the roughest exhibits. And I also saw that at one point it looked like there were over 150 flourishing Hebrew language and Yiddish language newspapers. And maybe we shouldn't abandon this place to be the museum of Jews or the cemetery. Maybe this can be a living place. And it is. And maybe it should continue to be a living place for Jews. But that's actually the question that I want to end with for you. It strikes me that Arthur is very lucky because your first love was kind of Israel. He came a little bit after. And when you became interested in Israel, you looked into the right of return. You were interested in living there. I mean, you have a real and a deep and a realistic love of Israel. But you're not choosing to live there. You're choosing to live here. You're a non-Jew. You're a pro-Israel activist. You are highly, highly, highly adjacent to this community. From your many perspectives, is it important that there is a Jewish community, that there remain a Jewish community in Poland, and why?
Absolutely. It's very hard for me to imagine Poland without Jews. I wish the community was bigger, was more flourishing, because when you think of those hundreds of years of joint history, you can see how much our Jewish friends and Jewish neighbors contributed to the culture, to the growth, and to the way of development of Poland. I don't mean economic, I mean in general. They were inseparable part of our country. And if Jews were to leave Poland now, for whatever reason, I don't think we're in the situation where the government will say, like in 1968, you should move out because you're a Zionist. But if they decide to leave Poland because it's their choice, the Nazis won.
Mm.
We shouldn't let this horrible ideology win. The fact that we have Jewish life that is growing. We have a Jewish school, we have a kosher store, we have a kosher restaurants, not too many, but they're growing, shows you something. And also, Poland is supposedly a very good place for Israelis to visit. Only last year, 300,000 Israelis came to Poland, not on Holocaust trips, for shopping, for nature, to the mountains.
For a break.
For a break. because Poland right now, not only it's close to Israel, we have direct flights, but it's also safe, or at least much safer than some other countries in Europe. So the Israelis come here, and I love it. If you go to a shopping mall, you hear every time you go there, you will see a group of, friends from Israel shouting in Hebrew.
I have to think that feels like a really good
amazing.
feeling for you.
It is. It really is amazing. And I was waiting for so many years for this to happen, that Israelis will not come to Poland just to see the Holocaust sites, and the other way around. I was really waiting for a long time for Poles, when they go to Israel, not to do the Holy Land tour only. Because I know it sounds horrible, but you can compare those two. Israeli groups are coming here with security for obvious reasons. They go to 3 camps, 1 shopping mall, and a synagogue, because that's the program. It's very intense. And then they go back. They don't have contact with Polish youth, Polish students. Most of them don't. They cannot roam around. After October 7, they cannot even leave their hotel rooms. They don't see Poland. They see cemetery. They see death. They see destruction. They're happy to be back to Israel, that is, Jewish state for living Jews. They don't know about Jewish community here. They don't meet Jewish community here. And on the other side, we have Poles going to Israel on, pilgrimage tours, Holy Land. So they go to Bethlehem, they go to Nazareth. They probably sleep in East Jerusalem because it's cheaper. They have most probably an Arab driver. The only thing they see in Israel is Ben Gurion Airport on their way out. And let's be honest, this is not the nicest experience you can have. So they come back here thinking, oh, Israelis are arrogant, rude, and, aggressive. And that's it. I'm really happy that this is slowly changing, but there is still a long way to go. That's why I'm here in Poland, not in Israel, doing the job I'm doing.
Marta, you are fascinating. I'm really glad that you gave us your time, and not just this hour, but your whole day. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to What Came After wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us online at whatcameafter.com.